Hello, everyone, and welcome. If you are new to this series, my name is Jason, and if you are a returner, welcome back. And to everyone, thanks for tuning in. I always like to start with a quarantine update. This will be day 25 for me since the start of my quarantine. Lately, I've been trying to figure out how to send packages or send things or receive things from my friends, and so I've been looking into seeing how much shipping things costs, and so you can prepay for a label, print it, stick it on a package, and send it. But they usually start at like $8 and up. My girlfriend's been making masks, and we want to just ship it to our friends, but it shouldn't cost that much. If we actually took it and went to the post office, it would probably cost less than $4. But the post office is a little further away, and I'm a little hesitant on going to the post office. Instead, we checked online prices and they seemed expensive. So I tried going to the UPS down the street from me. Actually, it's walking distance from me. Thinking that maybe they would be cheaper because they can weigh it and things like that. But it turns out they have service fees, and it ends up being about $10 anyway. So yeah, not ideal. The other way I've been able to get packages from my friends is that they would drive by and then leave it under my car, and I'd go out and grab it and pick it up, just so we can avoid contact as much as possible. And my friends would do it if they were already out, either grocery shopping or my other friend that works every day because he works at Home Depot. Those are just the different ways that I've been using to send and receive packages. So that's my quick quarantine update. So let's move on to today's topic, which is all about the extended mind. So let's go ahead and switch scenes here. Put this in full screen, and these will be thoughts from my coworker, Steven.
This morning, even though it was raining, I put on gloves and put up flyers. I'll keep doing this over the course of the week and wait for my group to grow. If it does, I'll ideate on how to enhance the value. And if not, well, at least it was a quick experiment.
So that quick experiment that Steven is talking about is trying to feed his neighborhood into a Facebook group called Tierra Santa versus COVID-19. So he's trying to get people together. So he's going around posting these QR codes that anyone can scan, and it'll take him to a website that he made, hosted on GitHub, and then that has links that feeds them into a Facebook group. So the Facebook group is just a community, so you can share thoughts and get ideas from each other, share updates on like grocery stores and number of cases and things like that. But the idea is the more data we have, then in that group you can also come up with strategies to help in this time of crisis. So that is what Steven is talking about there. So let's go ahead and continue this video.
This episode has 5 parts. If I had to name them, I'd pick Palace, Amphitheater, Garden, Library, and Denouement. We are here looking at a floor plan of a magic palace. It looks small on paper, but the real palace, if it existed, would be huge. This room is an amphitheater with a spot for a stage and 4 sections of seating for the audience to sit in. The library is a giant room that has only 1 book, but the book contains 5 chapters that describe every story ever written. The garden has a pathway with a shape you may recognize from a previous episode. It is the shape of a dilemma. We'll spend 1 minute in each room meditating on something that many cognitive scientists call extended mind.
So these are the 5 sections that Steven's been splitting his videos into. So all his videos will be made of 5 1-minute sections. And right now we're in the palace section. The next section is the amphitheater, and then the library, and then the garden of dilemmas, and then denouement. Or Steven has this little joke. He says, why not just say epilogue, which is what denouement is. So while you watch this video, go ahead and keep that in mind, which section of the video you are in. And if you're taking notes, you can even jot that down as you watch this video.
If I were giving a speech about extended mind, I might turn to the first section of the audience and say, for those of you who are students, if you don't know about your extended mind, you will remain trapped in your regular one forever. I might turn to the next section and say, teachers, if you aren't teaching your students about their extended minds, you are making your job harder and theirs. Then I would turn and say, artists, whether you know it or not, you know how to extend your mind. Please teach the engineers on your right. Finally, I'd say, engineers, whether you know it or not, you know how to extend your mind. Please teach the artists on your left.
So Stephen mentions engineers. We should know how to extend our mind. I'm actually an engineer, so I have my degree in computer engineering. So let's see what Stephen means by that. So extending your mind. So he's talking about the extended mind, which we mentioned in the previous episode. I think it was episode 5, where Stephen put up a prompt that said, hey, do some research on the extended mind and distributed cognition. So to sum it up, the extended mind, it refers to the idea that the reach of our mind also includes our environment. So if it's like a whiteboard or scratch paper or even just like sculptures and things we manipulate or figurines on a map or something like that. So the extended mind is not just what's in our head, but also what's around us, what's in our surroundings. And distributed cognition, which relates to the extended mind, just means taking my thought processes and distributing it between my mind and other things, my surroundings. So like my thinking power has been split up or divvied up or shared or distributed among maybe the whiteboard that I'm writing on. Or so as like from an engineer's perspective, we do this kind of thing all the time. So whenever we say we have a project or someone gives us a project that we have to design from the ground up, we wouldn't start just building a thing or coding a thing. We would start with maybe a whiteboard or notes on a piece of paper, and we would draw diagrams and use cases and flow charts, and depending on what we're trying to build. All those things, all those diagrams, notes, arrows, lines, those are all part of what we call the extended mind. So that's what Stephen is referring to. So let's go ahead and continue the video.
If we open the one book, we see that it is a story about stories. Chapters 2, 3, and 4 are called Beginnings, Middles, and
So we're now in the library.
They are surrounded by additional chapters, prologues, and epilogues. Does this structure really describe all stories?
Yeah, I remember elementary school, where we talked about defining a story and always had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And here we also have before the beginning, we have the prologue, and after the end, we have the epilogue or the denouement, as we said earlier. So let's see what else Stephen has to say.
Probably not. But then again, let's put it to the test. Once upon a time, I was just a normal coder. But then I journeyed to a scholarly realm known as graduate school and learned that some believe that the mind extends beyond the brain. I spent many years actively rejecting this idea. My mind is inside me. My mind is me. But then one day I wrote on paper, why do I want to believe that so badly? And by writing this down, I realized I had freed a tiny bit of space in my mind. Into that open space popped a second thought, which I also wrote down. Shouldn't I be striving not to need paper? Shouldn't I be striving not to write? I wrote. Isn't my brain a muscle? I wrote. And isn't writing a crutch? I wrote. I was transported to the...
So I'm going to pause right there and go back a little bit. Let's see.
Writing a crutch?
So Stephen tells his little story, and then as he tells it, he sort of diagrams, which part of the story he's at from the prologue. Notice that he ends at the end stage of the story. He doesn't get to the epilogue. I want to give a story of my own. This is a fun little exercise to do. So let me tell my story. So I guess I'll use my mouse cursor. So once upon a time, I was a computer engineering student in college, and eventually I needed to make money because I was a poor college student. So I started working at the Boys and Girls Club and ended up teaching in the education center, and we had a program called Club Tech. And we taught everything from like web design to Photoshop, movie editing, music editing, and just basic technology skills, technology programs for the Boys and Girls Club's members. And eventually I realized I really enjoyed that. I learned a lot. I didn't know much about photography, but I learned, all the little photography concepts and things like that. I knew some Photoshop, and so that was fun to teach. And I realized I enjoyed teaching, and I liked learning the things. I liked watching students learn. I like watching them evolve. I love being a part of that, being able to facilitate their learning. And so by the time I did graduate with my computer engineering degree, I did apply for some engineering jobs, but I ended up taking a job with the top tech camp and ended up teaching at like programming academies, game academies, ended up, moving up my ranks. I was pretty good at it. Ended up pretty much assistant director at a location. And then eventually I was hired on to write some of the new curriculum, and then I became a curriculum developer. And then from that job, I also became a curriculum director at a location in Santa Monica, and then I moved to San Diego, and which led to ThoughtStem, which has our nonprofit company Metacoders, which brings me to where I am right now, recording this Metacoders video for you. So that is my story. That's a fun exercise you can do as well. Tell your story and just keep track of where you are in this process, what stage of the story you're in. So let's go ahead, and I think this is about the end of the video. Let's go ahead and check.
I was transported to the Garden of...
Yeah, so this next section is the Garden of Dilemmas, and we'll talk about that in part 2. So this will be the end of part 1. If you are watching this on Udemy, there will be some assignments for you below. For everyone else, see you in part 2.